Hi, good morning. Welcome. Welcome to today's event at GenAI for Economic Opportunity. My name is Beena Srimali. I serve as Vice President of Community Development here at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. The Community Development team conducts research and engagement to advance economic resilience and mobility for low-income communities. I'm also part of the Emerging Technology Economic Research Network, or EERN, here at SF Fed. EERN events are opportunities for academics, researchers, technologists, and members of our communities who are studying, experiencing, and anticipating the economic impacts of emerging technologies to exchange ideas, learn from different sectors, and share insights. Today's conversation will focus on GenAI. While definitions vary in the field, we here at EERN define GenAI as a class of AI algorithms capable of generating new content and data, such as text, images, audio, video, and software code. As part of EERN, we've been having conversations around our district in places like Spokane, Phoenix, and Salt Lake City to understand how GenAI is being deployed and its potential impacts on the economy. Today, we'll be sharing a glimpse into how philanthropic and local nonprofit leaders here in the Bay Area are working to leverage GenAI to improve economic opportunity in low-income communities. Our hope is that it'll spark similar conversations in communities around our district and elsewhere around the country. We'll kick off with a presentation from Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered AI on the use of GenAI in the social impact sector, then move to a panel discussion with philanthropic leaders, and round out with a showcase of early use cases by nonprofit organizations who are at varying points in their journeys to highlight GenAI's potential and some of the early lessons learned. And our goals are that you'll leave with some ideas about how GenAI is being used so far and how philanthropy and community organizations can work with communities to design and use these technologies. As SF Fed President Mary Daly said on this stage at an EERN event in May, the reason the future of AI's impact on the economy is unpredictable is because humans are unpredictable. We are the ones who will shape this technology and how it gets used. So we hope today's session will help break down the topics and ultimately bring new perspectives and voices into the conversation. With that, let's get to our first speaker, Vanessa Parley. Vanessa is the Director of Research Programs at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. And she leads the HIA grant programs, research convening, student groups, and State of AI reports. Today, she'll be setting the stage for us on the use of GenAI in the social impact sector. Take it away, Vanessa.
All right. I think, let's see. I have a few slides. All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Vanessa Parley. I'm Director of Research Programs at Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. HAI is an interdisciplinary institute with the aim to advance research, education, policy, and practice to improve the human condition. So we have been guided by three aims since the beginning. The H, which is human impact. So the human impact of AI will be immense. And this requires us to consider the ethical questions before, during, and after the development of these technologies. The A is augment. AI will reshape the human workforce, and therefore we should focus on applications of AI that augment versus replace humans. Help humans be better at what they are already good at. Better teachers, better healthcare providers, better designers. And I is intelligence. So the human brain is one of the most complex devices known to man, and we should use what we know about the brain and learn about the brain to inform future AI algorithms. Now, FOMO, as many of you might already know, is the fear of missing out. How many of you feel like you're experiencing AI FOMO? Anybody? Me? Yes. So good. I also feel like I have AI FOMO. There's so much to learn, feels like there's not enough brain space to keep it all in there. And as I mentioned, I work at Stanford University where some of this technology was developed. Even there, even in the computer science department, there is AI FOMO. So for the next few minutes, I'll share a little bit about what I know about AI. Throughout the day, I encourage all of you to share a little bit about what you know. We can learn bits from each other and hopefully feel more comfortable being an active voice in the conversation around this exciting new technology. So for those not familiar, the AI Index is an annual report that provides unbiased, vigorously vetted data for policymakers, researchers, journalists, executives, and the general public to develop a deeper understanding of this complex emerging field. The AI Index looked at output of Midjourney for an AI-generated image of Harry Potter. And as many of you know, AI has been getting better over time. The left side was a picture of Harry Potter when we asked Midjourney to generate it in 2022. And then the right side is as of December 2023. So you can see even in 2022, it was kind of like an abstract version. And then in 2023, it was quite hyper-realistic. How many of you know what an AI benchmark is? A few hands? Okay, good. So an AI benchmark is a metric or goal used to evaluate how well AI is performing. So for example, in 2012, Fei Li developed ImageNet, which was a benchmark to evaluate algorithms on how well they performed on image classification. This chart shows the progress of AI systems on benchmarks relative to human performance. So the dotted line is the human baseline. Each of those colored lines is a different AI benchmark from image classification, reading comprehension, basic level math. And you can see that the lines over time have been hitting the human baseline and hitting them more quickly. The slope of those lines are steeper. Does that mean that AI can do everything that humans can do? No. If any of you have played with these tools, you might realize there are still some flaws. So researchers are continuously developing new benchmarks to kind of drive research forward and drive the progress of this technology. So one example is a new benchmark called MMMU, the Massive Multidiscipline Multimodal Understanding Benchmark. And this benchmark comprises of 11,000 college-level questions around health, humanities, technology, art, design. The question formats are not just language. There's charts, there's graphs, there's chemical structures, and this is one of the most demanding tests of AI to date. As of May 2024, the highest performing model was GPT-4o with an average score of 69%. So if any teachers in the room, that is still a failing grade, but not by much. And for reference, the human average is 83%. Now, a huge barrier to creating these models is training cost. According to estimates we've developed in collaboration with an organization called Epoch AI, the training cost for state-of-the-art AI models has been significantly increasing. So it's estimated that OpenAI's GPT-4 cost $78 million to train, and Google's Gemini Ultra cost $191 million. These rising costs mean only a handful of organizations can develop these models, and this is just training, not inference. So not every time you ask the model a question, there's a cost associated. And an issue with that is that there's just not a standardized evaluation methodology. So it's difficult to compare and be informed consumers of the technology. The AI Index examined a selection of leading AI developers and assessed which benchmarks they were using to evaluate their systems. This chart shows 5 of the top models, and you can see that 3 of those benchmarks, all 5 models used, but again, there is inconsistency. And when you look at benchmarks focused on responsible AI, there is even more inconsistency. Truthful QA was the one that was used the most, which is looking at whether the model generates truthful answers, whether it gets fooled by some of the false answers in the training data. In overall analysis, we found that 1 in 5 developers do not report any responsible AI benchmarks, but they do talk about internal kind of safety checks that they are conducting. All right, so now that we have a bit of grounding around the state of AI, I wanted to highlight a few examples from the research I'm seeing that I find quite interesting. So first, I mentioned on a previous slide that there's no standard benchmark for evaluating these models. To help create some sort of standard for comparison, the Center for Research on Foundation Models at Stanford created what they call a Foundation Model Transparency Index. So in October 2023, they scored 10 major foundation model developers on transparency along 100 indicators. So these indicators include computational resources required, data used, release policies, terms of service usage policies. There are 100 of them. The index showed that developers are generally quite opaque. The average score was a 37%, and the top model scored 54%. So again, another failing grade. And then in May, the researchers conducted a follow-up to understand how this landscape has changed, scoring developers on the same 100 indicators. And here the purple bar is 2024 score, and the blue is 2023. You can see that in the short 6 months between the analysis, the organizations became much more transparent, which shows how a standard set of well-thought-out benchmarks can really drive behavior, even in some of the largest organizations. The next bit of research I wanted to share is from my colleagues at the Stanford Digital Economy Lab. So they analyzed the effects of generative AI on worker productivity in the context of technical customer support. The study was based on over 5,000 agents, and 1,300 of them were given access to an LLM-based assistant that provided real-time suggestions for communicating with their customers. It was trained on 1 million interactions, both successful and unsuccessful, and was rolled out in phases, which created kind of a nice environment for this research. And the study found that worker productivity increased 14%. But the more interesting part is that this productivity boost was really concentrated in the lower experienced workers, that darker gray dot on the chart, where the productivity gains were 35%. The more experienced workers experienced a marginal impact. And this result shows the possibility that, in contrast to earlier waves of information technology where the higher skilled workers really benefited, perhaps generative AI could particularly benefit workers of the lower levels of the skills distribution. And while the Digital Economy Lab's research, as well as others, have pointed to enhancing quality and productivity over time, over-reliance on the technology can impair worker performance. So this research is from a study at Harvard University where they looked at professional recruiters reviewing resumes. And when someone was provided with assistance, their productivity increased. However, they broke this group then out into two different cohorts. One cohort was given the tool and told that it's good, use it, don't worry about it. And the other cohort was told that the AI can make mistakes, so keep checking it, but use it. And the folks who were told they had the good AI actually performed significantly worse than the folks who were told that they had the bad AI. And the study theorizes that the recruiters with the good AI became complacent over time, overly trusting the technology, while those with the bad AI kind of remained vigilant and scrutinized the results. And finally, directly related to the audience here, HAI has for many years seen the potential opportunities for this technology. And when ChatGPT was released and the social sector and everyone became much more aware of the tech, we wanted to better understand how the social sector was thinking about it. In partnership with a nonprofit organization called Project Evident, we developed a national survey to shed light on the current use, interest in, and concerns with AI in the social and education sectors. We had a hypothesis that many were already using it, but we wanted to test this and also understand what the barriers might be. And this was actually meant to be more of an internal initiative to help us develop new programming, but we thought we would share the results so that we can all kind of make progress together. So despite active debate on whether the social and education sectors should use AI, the survey suggests that many are already using it. So the conversation is not about whether to use it, it's about how to use it to enhance equitable outcomes. And across grant makers and nonprofits, bias was cited as the major barrier to AI adoption. which makes sense. Many of these organizations deal with sensitive data, marginalized communities. And this is one of the reasons I believe the social sector needs to be an engaged consumer of AI, understand the technology, understand how the bias manifests, and perhaps define minimum thresholds required of these technology companies to address bias in the product. Nonprofits specifically were concerned with how much AI will cost the organization, which also brings up a conversation about how funding works. Should it be project-based? Do we need to start looking at funding at the infrastructure level, the data, the people, the compute? And when we launched this survey a little over a year ago, there wasn't much work looking at how the social sector was using AI. Since then, there has been resources and articles written by some in this room. So I encourage you all to take a look at those, and there's more even that are not on this slide. And in closing, I wanted to circle back to this concept of human-centered AI. So when HAI was launched in 2018, it was a relatively new concept. Since then, many organizations have come up looking at responsible AI, human-centered AI, AI for good. But as our faculty director, James Landay, says, saying that you're doing AI for good isn't good enough. And everyone has a different definition of what that means. So we've developed a framework on what might help to think about this. And it starts with the user. So starting with a user-centered process, integrating known techniques from human-computer interaction. But you can't design only for the user. That would be like designing a sentencing system only for the judge, but ignoring the community, the people accused, the families, lawyers, really understanding the different barriers and structural barriers that people come from. We also need to understand the impacts on society at large. If we need to be able to forecast what might happen if the technology were to become ubiquitous and design early on to mitigate those impacts. And this is all very hard, especially for computer scientists. So we need as many voices as possible at the table as we develop and deploy these technologies. So I would encourage all of you not to get paralyzed by this AI FOMO and really get involved. We need a diverse set of voices and areas of expertise to work together. We need to think critically about what we really want from this technology for this sector. The incentive systems, the responsible AI benchmarks, and various other parts of the ecosystem so that we can truly benefit from this new and exciting technology. Thank you all. I have my email there if you want to reach out, and I'll hand it back to Bina.
Finding my notes here. Okay. Thanks, Vanessa. That was just such a helpful context and background for our conversation. Really appreciate that. Good questions for all of us to be thinking about. Next up, we'll spotlight the ways philanthropy can bolster the use of GenAI within organizations dedicated to serving marginalized communities. So I'm happy to introduce this panel. Thank you all for joining us here on stage. Our panel consists of Rafi Krikorian. Rafi is the Chief Technology Officer of Engineering at Emerson Collective, where he focuses on using technology and data to accelerate solutions that promote social good. Kevin Barenblatt, co-founder and president of Fast Forward. Fast Forward's community unites the tech sector and philanthropic investors in support of mission-driven entrepreneurs, equipping AI-powered nonprofits with resources, capital, and mentorship needed to succeed. And Lily Gangas, who's Chief Technology Community Officer at the Kapor Foundation. The Kapor Foundation provides research and thought leadership, operates programs, and supports strategic partnerships and investments to increase diversity across the tech ecosystem. And Nick Arevalo, Capacity Building Director at Tipping Point Community, a grant-making organization focused on poverty in the Bay Area, where Nick supports a large number of local nonprofits. And this conversation will be moderated by Assistant Vice President of Community Development Research here at the SF Fed, Elizabeth Kneebone. Elizabeth manages the research team in community development and shapes and contributes to its research portfolio. Here at the Fed, we don't raise money or give out money. We serve as a neutral convener and are bringing together these perspectives to further the conversation. With that, I'll turn things over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Bina. Appreciate that introduction. Thank you as well to Vanessa for her remarks. I feel like they did such an effective job framing today's conversation and highlighting some of the themes that we're really hoping to delve further into in our conversation. And we really appreciate having each of our panelists here today to participate in this discussion on a very timely and complex topic. I should also say, Vanessa, thank you for AI FOMO. I feel like that term's really going to come in handy in our conversation today. But to get started, I'd love to start with you, Rafi, and especially thinking about there's so many different perspectives on Gen AI, especially as we think about promoting economic opportunity. There are voices that are very optimistic, saying full steam ahead, let's embrace this transformative moment. There are skeptics, people who are saying maybe let's pause, let's pump the brakes and take a moment to really better understand what's going on. As we think about people who may be coming new into this conversation with this very uncertain landscape, could you give us your lay of the land on how to navigate those sort of diversity of perspectives? And also tell us a bit about how you think about philanthropy's role in this very uncertain environment as these tools are being adopted and rolled out.
Yeah, well, I can give a shot at least. So, like I said, I'm the CTO at the Emerson Collective, and we even have a challenge within our own organization. Like we have the Emerson Collective. For those of you who don't know, is a pretty diverse set of groups. Everything from venture investing to philanthropy to programmatic teams, and you can even see inside our organization different challenges on how we should be embracing AI or how we should be talking to our investments about it. Like our investment team might be full steam ahead, our philanthropic team has a little bit more of a, not pump the brakes, but a little more cautious attitude toward it. So we're even trying to thread this internally amongst ourselves. But the way that I at least look at it when I talk to other organizations is to really just like step back and like how I approach technology in general is just like, don't embrace technology for the sake of embracing technology. Let's look at what our real problems are, who are the people we're trying to solve, what are the issues we're trying to like make a difference at, and then let's see whether technology can fix those issues. So like I usually coach a bunch of organizations to be like, before we talk about this externally, should we just look inside first? Like, can we look at the processes that we're using? Where are we spending most of our time? Like, we've actually deployed some of our engineers and some of our product managers to shadow executive directors at different nonprofit organizations, just be like, where do they spend all their time? And can we just speed that up a bit? Like, for a while, one of the biggest things we were bumping into is like people were spending a lot of time writing first drafts of job descriptions. Like, can we just automate that? Like, can we just get the first draft out the door, make that hour-long exercise of us sitting at Google Docs a 5-minute exercise instead, and find all those opportunities inside? Like, let's get comfortable with that technology, how we use it, before we go starting talking to external people and understanding whether or not they will want to use it instead. So this like introspection stance is kind of how we take it first, and then making sure we understand like what do our communities really need? What are the problems we're really trying to solve? And let's like have a conversation and lean in there. So like this collaborative approach of trying to like both understand, like use this opportunity to both understand like what really are the things we want to go solve, and then how does technology come in on the side to help fix it.
Right, that's so important. Not technology for technology's sake, right? Kevin, your organization is an incubator for tech nonprofits. Can you share a bit more about how you help bridge between the tech and nonprofit sectors, and also the ways that you think perhaps philanthropy is or could be playing a role in helping advance more tech-oriented solutions for nonprofits?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the Federal Reserve for hosting this. Awesome to see so many people here, and hopefully tuning in as well. We started Fast Forward almost 11 years ago to bring more tech to our biggest social problems. And before Fast Forward, actually I worked in the technology industry at startups. And when I had the idea for Fast Forward, I was working at like a for-profit investment firm, and I was inspired by, I'd known Salcon, we'd gone to school together, and I was surprised by how hard it was for him to start an organization that used technology as a nonprofit. Here's a guy who had millions of users, students, and even as Bill Gates' favorite teacher was having a hard time raising philanthropic capital to start Khan Academy. And so the idea for Fast Forward really is to try to bridge these worlds between people who want to use technology to make the world better, and those philanthropic capital allocators who can help support people in those endeavors. As someone who is new to the nonprofit world, now in my 11th year in the space, I can say that it's true. The social sector definitely feels like it eats last at the table of innovation and technology. Whatever FOMO you might feel at Stanford around AI, we feel way more in the nonprofit space. And so there really is, I think, like a desire to do the work better, but a lack of resources to understand sometimes how to do that, or to pay for it, to pay for the expertise, the access to the technology, or even the data to make like something like AI successful inside an organization. So fast forward, for 11 years we've run a tech accelerator, almost like a Y Combinator, but helping nonprofits using technology get started. And we've had 100 organizations go through, 100 nonprofits go through that program. And then we also try to bring more resources, like make that available to organizations who don't go through our programming. So everything from playbooks. We recently started AI for Humanity newsletter to try to tell the stories of these organizations that are not like fearful of AI, but using AI today and making the world tangible, improving the world today. And we recently published a 4-part series in the Stanford's Social Innovation Review on ways that nonprofits are currently using AI. So this is across issue areas and sectors, everything from education to climate and global health, all improved by how the technology works today.
Lily, you, the K4 Foundation recently came together with the EERN Network and the San Francisco Foundation to make a $25 million funding commitment focused on equity in advancing AI. Could you share a little bit more about what the goals are for that effort? And also just more broadly thinking about what does the funding space look like beyond traditional VCs, or what could it look like as the space evolves?
Yes, definitely. And thank you again for having us. And to your point, $25 million is a start compared to the trillions of dollars that we've been seeing going into investments, and specifically on AI, and if we double click on generative AI. So I do think it's important to note that, right? Because I do think that that's, when folks first hear, it's like, okay, to what end? But it's a start, and especially being here with you all, I think it's an opportunity to also have you all be part of it, because as we think about the role that California has in showing, can AI be done right? Can we responsibly, equitable, and ethically do it when we have 30 out of the 65 top AI companies based here, right? So that creates another bigger responsibility, I think, for the folks who live here, who call home, but also the people who are investing, because the world is really looking. At the same time, we want to make sure that we do it right, because when you are 7 miles away from Oakland, we see the disparities, and not too far from here, even just in the blocks out of San Francisco. So the time here is learning what we've seen over the past 10 years. How can we do it right? And that's going to take an ecosystem perspective. And that's how we see it here at the Caper Center, is an ecosystem perspective, everything from K through 12 education all the way through new models of venture capital and entrepreneurship. So to answer your question, is 5 main goals. One, we want to make sure that we're investing in world-class education that's accessible for all students, to not just be the consumers of these technologies, but really be the creators and the owners eventually. And that really puts at the forefront making sure that we're having computer science be accessible to the students, especially the students out in East Oakland, as an example, right? We know there's a lot of disparities, a lot of folks who are working towards doing that. The second part is really investing in new talent development that is also aligned where the workforce is going, making sure that we're looking at new models of worker power. We have an opportunity now to really renegotiate our social contract with work. It's not just be like the most productive, it's like to what end? If it's creating more disparities, if it's creating unhealthy lifestyles for all of us, I think that this is an opportunity to also be looking at the community colleges, to looking at the Cal States, not just your world-class research, no love over there. It's everyone that is involved, because we also want to make sure that we are creating a way that it's a dynamic learning that is reflecting how fast this is moving. The third goal is really looking at investments in new innovations, so new technologies and products that are actually looking at closing gaps of access, that are looking at using this type of technology responsible. The opportunity here is at creating new business models that really center new populations, new communities from the day one. And I think this is where work with a lot of the foundations, and especially those foundations that do investments into venture arms and tech companies, are really critical. And the fourth is looking at policy and regulation. And I know some folks here will be like, no, we don't want to talk about it, but it's super important. Just in California, there are 41 plus bills mentioning some parts of AI. There's contentious bills right now that the question is it over-regulation, or do we need more space for innovation? I think that's why we're having these conversations, so that way everyone can be educated to partake in that. And the last part is really making sure that we are not ignoring the basic fundamental infrastructure gaps that have been existing since the time of redlining, that our communities out in East Oakland and parts of San Francisco and the broader California have faced, and that looks at housing. Can we use some of this technology to help improve access in those areas, connectivity, other wraparound? So I do really think that it's an exciting time and opportunity, and I think that this is really the right place for all of us to start. And just to close out on the funding landscape, I think this is a call to action for all the foundations to join us in this conversation, because not all foundations are acting at the same urgency. Everyone is a different, mission areas, focus areas. But let's not forget, as foundations, we could do grants, multi-year, multi-level, structured very interestingly. We could also be LPs, limited partner investors in these VC funds. We could also create new models that are using more patient capital. We've seen program-related investments as a way to be able to bring that in. But imagine if we were able to, all of these foundations, who sometimes some of these foundations have billions of dollars of endowments, but we're spending it at the 5% rate. You saw the chart that just within the 1 year, how fast this is moving. That 5% per year doesn't cut it anymore. So that's the call to action that I have for all of us here. And I think if we do that, we'll be able to really leverage this technology in a way that helps us have those equity issues that are maybe disproportionately impacting workers of color, workers of different learning abilities, different economic opportunities. I think this is the time to do it right.
So many good threads raised in that response that we're going to come back to and really unpack a little bit further. But you mentioned that sort of that range, that really variable landscape of philanthropy and what funders, where they are in their journey and what they look like. And Nick, I'd love to hear from you as a local funder, how your organization is thinking about this GenAI moment. And beyond just your organization, what role you see for locally rooted community-based foundations in this space.
Great. Well, thanks again for having us for this conversation. And in that way, at Tipping Point, one of the things that we do is we're very focused on a limited ecosystem. So here in the Bay Area, nonprofits here in the Bay Area. And so for organizations that are in our portfolio, they receive a general operating grant to help them do the business of the day. But then we also partner with them, with the leadership of those organizations closely, to pinpoint the next place within the organization that they want to strengthen their infrastructure. And that's where our AI moment is coming in terms of the work that we're doing with our portfolio. And really, we're learning with these organizations. And I think that that's the key component for philanthropy at this time, is to learn with the organizations that are in your portfolio on how we can move forward. And the way that we're doing that is we're making sure that we're collecting the use cases, because that's what lots of organizations are very, very eager for. They're like, great, but how do we use this, right? How do we put some structure around the Wild Wild West rogue use of AI that's happening within our organizations, right? And so we're collecting those use cases and sharing them back out to the portfolio. So from the portfolio, feeding them back out to the portfolio about how organizations are utilizing these tools. In addition to that, then, we're also creating forums for organizations to come together and pinpoint what are their business challenges that they're facing, and is there an AI solution for some of those business challenges? And so, and when we do that, what we're seeing is that there's two buckets of organizations: those who are looking for the light lift options for integrating AI into the work that they're doing. And so these are organizations that are looking for opportunities to take advantage of services that they might already be paying for. So things like utilizing Zoom for note-taking, or figuring out how to best utilize some of the embedded solutions that are in your CRM in terms of doing deeper analysis. The other place is organizations that are really ready to do heavy lifts, right? Looking to restructure a core component of how they do their work. And so some examples that we're seeing there are, you'll hear a little later about a couple of organizations that are integrating AI solutions into their case management work, right? And the work there isn't just about turning on some kind of solution that you purchase. It's really fundamentally giving these organizations the resources that they need to revisit the way that they're approaching key components of their work and be able to build out the solutions to integrate it into how they need so that they can do what is most important, which is increase their impact. And so I think that for us, it's this continuously learning and seeing how we can engage with these organizations, both on the light lift options as well as these heavier lift options, and getting the resources out so these organizations can really tackle these challenges. And we invite our peers to jump in, because there's no way we could fund all this. There's no need to have FOMO from a funding perspective in terms of the opportunities that are sitting out there for us to jump in on. And so I think that that's where I would invite folks to kind of think through and see where are the opportunities that organizations are identifying, and then come and learn with them and provide the resources so they can move forward.
I really like that framing of the light lift versus the heavier lift. And I think that's a theme we've heard coming through many of these answers is what's the issue you're trying to address? What are the problem you're trying to solve? It could be operational, it could be service delivery. As we think about the range of ways that GenAI could be applied, and when people registered for today, we asked them to log their questions, what they wanted to hear about. A big theme was, how do we make sure that the community is involved in the design of these tools, however these may be brought to bear in different organizational solutions. So I'd love to hear more from each of you about what you're already seeing in the ways to bring nonprofits and developers and program designers and community together to help to co-create or design or have a voice in how these tools and what tools are being developed, or opportunities to do that more to make sure that that voice is at the table. And do you want to start? We'll go this way this time. We'll start with Nick.
Sure. Well, I think that when we heard earlier today about bringing voices to the table is so critical in the development of these solutions, right? And I'm not sure how close you all get to work with nonprofit and nonprofit staff, but they are amazing people, right? These are folks who are professionals and have a very specific skill set that they're bringing to the work, and in addition to that, have a great understanding of what the needs are in the communities and some of the most underserved communities in our area. And so I think there is a huge opportunity to make sure that we're integrating tools that are developed specifically for that sector, bringing the voice of nonprofit staff in the development of these tools, because they understand these communities so well. They care about the ethical use of the data and who and how the data is being used for. So I think that that's a critical opportunity. In addition to that, it's also a professional development opportunity, right? Integrating people into the voice and the creation of tools is a key aspect of how this economy works moving forward. And so I think that that's another opportunity to kind of use and integrate folks' voice into the work.
I love that, because that centers really the problems that we're trying to tackle, right? I think when we think about the broader level, all this different large language models are being created, and then there's a different stack, right, that getting built upon. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a specific use case, a problem that you're specifically trying to tackle, you're just going to be kind of floating around. And to your point, this is where I see a lot of the community-based organizations or experts in specific issues. They have access to data that not other organizations may have. That societal contextual data that can be the nuance is the innovation really standing there. But of course, because of resourcing issues, capacity building as well, to make sure that there's a technical understanding and learning is important. So just as much as you need your developers, you need your social scientists. You need the folks, the case managers who are getting the direct input as primary data, right? That could be really helpful. And what we're seeing is this is the part that's exciting when we think about the opportunities to invest in new startups, new companies, new organizations, new models, new ventures. Is part of that. It's looking at examples that, there's one, Human DX. They've been looking at all these different large language models, and they're trying to be like, okay, let's get the best answer and let's calibrate, but we're going to bring in physicians. We're going to bring in the doctors. So the human in the loop to make sure that, is there a way that we're actually better leveraging this data and really applying it to specific use cases, in this case, different sets of health questions. And then at the end, they come back with a better set of a potential algorithm that they can say, okay, now we could actually say what's true, what's fake, what's hallucination, what's actually the most accurate, a lower cost that weren't there before. So that's an example. Another example of community-based organization, super early in development, is the Learning Guild, GILS, Learning Society, by a founder out in Oakland that is specifically working with CBOs to be able to help them develop that capacity, be able to look at what does the data governance look like? How are they managing it? Do they know that they could actually be more sustainable if they were able to have an opportunity to inform these new technologies? And so there's a lot of those different types of models. The other model, just at a broader level that I'm seeing, is other tech workers coming together. So Aspen's Tech Accountability Coalition, as an example, is bringing the ML researchers, is bringing the designers, is bringing the developers at different levels, coming together to really center on what does equitable products look like? What are those specific case studies, scenarios, but also best practices that should be enveloped in the development cycle? And I started my career as an engineer, so I know I've been as electrical and software engineers, I've been like in the weeds of really understanding if you don't have that edge cases that you're really looking for, that could blow up your entire system. And so it's really exciting to be seeing this level of product developers with that sense coming together to really get into the nuance, because I think that's where we're at now. I think now we really have to look at these specific sector examples, use cases, specific problems to really be able to apply these technologies in a way that have the benefits that we all want to have. I'll pass it over to you.
At Fast Forward, I mean, we really view AI as a new tool, and it's really exciting that the world has this new wrench. And now we're all trying to figure out, like, where can we best use this wrench to create the world that we want to live in. And for the nonprofits that we work with, we have a real bias towards supporting organizations where the founder and the team have experience with the problem that they're solving. And that's where we see many of the most compelling use cases so far of like AI in the nonprofit and the social sector. So for example, after us, you'll hear from a couple nonprofits on the panel. One is Jared Chung from Career Village, who will talk about how for many years he's had an online tool for providing career advice to students. And now he can make that tool even better and more effective using AI. We also have Hee-Jae Lim from Talking Points, who also for many years has used mobile technology to connect parents and families with classrooms. And now using AI is able to support more languages and deeper conversation and more personalized information and do better analysis of the kinds of conversations and the impact that they're having. But I think this is also true, and those are both like local Bay Area examples. We also see this though in the global context. So there's an organization called Digital Green that uses AI to equip farmers and extension agents in remote and rural communities throughout like India and Africa, providing them tools they need on like local growing conditions and how to best basically be more successful as farmers. And we also see it through an organization called Ursilia, which is like an open source model hub for researchers doing research in infectious disease. So they basically provide tools for researchers in Africa to better solve diseases that are like more prevalent in their own communities. So I really like actually how Bina started with that quote about how like, here's this tool and it's our own story to write. Like it's up to us to decide like where we apply the technology and how we want it to impact like the world in which we live.
I mean, double click on what everyone said already. I run a team of engineers and product managers and UX designers at Emerson. So we get asked a lot, like, can you help us build this thing? Or can you connect us with someone who might be able to build something? Like everyone is asking us like, I want to have this AI thing in my portfolio. And not everyone can. I mean, we'll just be really honest. Like, there's some combination of talent, some combination of funding, combination of other exogenous things that need to come together in order to make that actually happen. But the thing I always remind everyone, so like we've talked about how to build with purpose, how to build with the community in mind, but we're also all like residents and citizens of a bigger context that we're sitting in. And the thing I remind all our nonprofit partners is that you're even having a perspective and a voice and speaking out on how you want the world to be shaped around us, I think is incredibly important. And like, if you're not going to go build something, that's potentially one way to go do it. So like, also speaking at some of the health context, like I've had conversations with partners who are just like, if you just start even organizing your information in a way that at some future day we can talk about how AI could be used to analyze it, or specifically how to like enhance the perspective of how you think this community should be taken care of. I think that, you know, these systems are built in like these three-legged stool approaches. So like, there's usually like a tech company, there's some governmental and policy thing, but then there's civil society. And like, all our organizations have a voice on like, what's the world we want to live in? Otherwise, these technologies might shape the world that we live in for us. And so like having like a perspective and a way to like push back. So like we mentioned policy at some point. Like I actually tell some of our organizations that like, there are 40-something bills coming through in California. Like, if you have a perspective on one of them, you should potentially start talking about it. Like, there's a whole bunch of bills around journalism and AI that may or may not have died, depending on how you look at it. But like, you could be weighing in on like, what's the importance of these type of things for the communities that you work in. So if you're not actually going to be building, or not yet building, or still like trying to figure out exactly how you're going to build, just starting to tell the story of your community, so it's not taken as like a generic brush that AI is just going to manage this in some way. How should AI manage the work that you do? How do you want that world to live? I think it's such an important thing that like, all our partners, all the people who work need to actually start leaning into.
I like that image of the three-legged stool of how we build this system too. And that kind of leads me to the next question, which I think, Lily, you already started to touch on, in thinking about all the capacity needs to build this system and to make it work, and to make it work equitably in the nonprofit sector, being a part of that as well. And you know, Kevin, since you're the one who said the nonprofits tend to eat last, which again, I think was very evocative, maybe you could start and talk about what you see in terms of the capacity needs, but also what other resources are already there that maybe we could build on, or organizations could look to if they're interested in this work.
I feel like we could make the whole panel just about this. I mean, I think like if the for-profit and government sectors are feeling short-staffed for capital and expertise and resources to challenge, to pursue AI, if folks at Stanford are feeling FOMO, only imagine. I think the answer, basically, the shortest answer to the question is yes. Like, there's all of the things are needed in this third leg of the stool in order for organizations to be successful. Sometimes I wonder if the one that's like most underappreciated beyond like the money and the expertise, access to compute and credits, really is the data. A couple of folks have alluded to that already, but I'm pretty sure there are companies out there that know everything I've ever clicked on the internet. I think for people who are doing research on infectious diseases in Africa, or trying to help the farmers in India, some of those groups that we know about that are trying to use AI in the social sector, and then many more that we haven't talked about. I think their biggest challenge is really having access to the kinds of data, enough data, structured in the right way, that they can actually generate insights from the data. AI is generally only as good as the data that it's built upon, and that really is something that I think the social sector will need to build more capacity in that area in order to truly drive the impact that we want to see.
I would just add, I think looking at the role of public sector as well, when we think about our city level, county, state, and federal, right? So like more than 10 years ago, I used to work in the consulting in the public sector during Obama's time, when the whole open data movement was taking place, and there was a lot of opportunity to get some of our data sets on the federal side ready, right? And unfortunately, as we saw, some of those lived, some of those got killed during some administration changes, won't name any names, but then now we're back here, and the point trying to be like, how do we also look at some of these data that we as citizens are paying for, right, as another asset that our communities can leverage? When we think about the the data sources that all the nonprofits are leveraging, all the types of independent research they have to do. There's a whole lot of data sets, just even at the Department of Commerce and all the different agencies that are under, that are going unutilized and inaccessible. So there's also another effort that we've supported to help look at how can we get some of the data ready for these types of use cases, and how does that look like in an open data model development. That's a whole other conversation, but there are conversations of like, well, what's the role, what are the guidelines? And that's happening right now. And I think that those are also opportunities when we think about the intersection in the ecosystem of, we can't just put it all the most challenging problems on CBOs. Those are literally systemic issues and needs that we need to make sure we're addressing. Not from the CBO is going to resolve it, but this is really the whole entire ecosystem and the role that our public sector has to play here. And so I know as we collaborated with Governor Newsom's office and the different universities here as well, back in May for the Generative AI Summit, that was another role to show that our actual public sector at all those different levels are taking the next steps forward. And we saw at the federal level the opportunity that there is. There's also a lot of huge opportunity and need, as you were sharing, that we need to make sure that if folks are maybe not sure where they fall in, you fall in because as an organization, as an individual, as a leader, there are digital civil rights that currently are being violated. This is why the FTC has task forces. This is why the DOJ has specific cases that they're working with. The EEOC as an example, right, and the CFPB. So there are current issues that we know are happening. There are current issues that are harming and preventing some of our civil rights, but a lot of our community members may not even know that that's happening. And so that's a whole other thread, I think, that's important to bring into the conversation. And there's a different role for everyone to play, as Rafi mentioned. And I do think that right now, especially, we want to make sure that we advocate for these types of more responsible uses, understanding transparency and auditing.
Yeah, I would just jump into in that there's some real pressures on the nonprofit sector, right? Right now that they're facing, right? There's a pressure from a workforce standpoint, right? It's a very tight workforce for nonprofits, specifically here in the Bay Area. And then there's a consistent desire to increase your impact, right? And so that's creating this opportunity and this desire to find efficiencies in doing your work, right? And so I think that that's collectively where we can come together and really, really focus on how can we help these organizations maximize the workforces that they do have in place, keep them around for as long as they'd like to stay in those seats, and help them engage in this. And I think that the way we could move forward is continuing to provide examples on how to really make these AI solutions come to life for the nonprofits that are in the sector, as well as help them maximize the data sets that they're sitting on, right? Some of the nonprofits here in the Bay Area that have been able to really dig into their own data around their client populations become the national experts on that group. And so I think that this is another place where we could really try to maximize the opportunities that are sitting in front of us.
Yeah, again, I'm going to double click on what everyone said. I mean, I think it is some combination of like our organization should be thinking a lot more about advocacy, portraying the world that we want to live in, not the world that's being shaped around us. We should be figuring out how to like prepare for AI, not necessarily always be building for it. Because again, let's just be real, there's both a capital shortage and a talent shortage in order for every single organization to be working with it. And so like try and figure out how to like organize our data, do deep dives in data. And we should be thinking about a lot about back office efficiency. I think that like it's super unsexy to say that, but I think that like if we can unlock time, that's effectively unlocking capital in a lot of ways. So like if we can just make our organizations single digit percentages more efficient just by using these type of generative tools in the back, I think that could be really beneficial to all of us. I would love us all to be in a place of thinking about how do we deploy AI directly into the communities, but I think a lot of that also requires us to just be like story tell what that aspirational future looks like, as opposed to just trying to drive a car really quickly to get to somewhere. So like try and figure out what it means for our communities, having those conversations, understanding what real opportunities are, talking with each other, figuring out ways to collaborate on these aspirational future like narratives. I think those are also a really important thing that we could be doing.
I think something that's coming through, sort of bubbling into the conversation that I just want to put a finer point on here is the idea, as we talk about data, organizing the data, making it available, unlocking the data, there are also concerns about risks, right? Like what could be inequitable about AI and how it's deployed in the community. And Lily, you started to touch on this a bit, but thinking about the social sector, the nonprofit sector, the philanthropy, what's the role that sector could be playing in thinking about guardrails or how to protect communities against the potential negative consequences?
Definitely. I'll go first, but I'll be brief because I know this is like the juicy part of the conversation. I mean, this is why the Caper Center, we launched our Equitable Tech Policy Initiative more than 3, it's going to be almost 4 years now, where we're looking at it across the ecosystem that I described, the mirrors, those 5 goals of how do we want to have more responsible, ethical, equitable AI in California. Everything is interconnected, and we mirror those across 9 policy issues. Everything, again, from the computer science education through the actual more progressive tax opportunities to new models, new business models, because a lot of our social systems are being starved. Our CBOs are being starved. So we're really at one of those areas where the power concentration keeps going towards one side. And I think that this is important, why it needs to be a public, private, and civil society conversation. Because if we think about all the technology that's been developed, back in the day, a lot of our, as an example, right, the location that was in a phone, that was military GPS. I got to work on GPS projects back in the day. But the civilian use cases is what allowed a lot of these types of apps to be happening. We've lost that sense of oversight, collaboration, but also understanding of, is it ready to go out? Is it ready to be applied? And I do think that as a foundation, and maybe there are other foundations as well that we've collaborated with, as an example, when VP Harris's work around announcing public interest AI, right? There was a set of other foundations that came together and say, look, we're going to make sure that we're funding things that are important. Things that are protecting the civil rights in the digital realm. Things that are protecting democracy. Things that are also creating new opportunities for new laborers, renegotiations and power structures. So then that way we all have a better quality of life after all of this is said and done. And so I do think that philanthropy has a place. As an example there, we are helping develop and inform, provide grants towards research, programs, towards policy, and then the actual development of technologies. So I bring that as an example because I do think that our role, especially as philanthropy, and there's different models, whether you're a private foundation or you're a family office that may have different types of tools at your display. But I do think that we have an opportunity to not only de-risk, but to also help increase innovations in those areas that maybe the private sector is not ready yet. And the opportunity as that there's here right now is that there's a lot of public dollars that go with it. The Jobs Act had $1.2 trillion. The CHIPS Act has almost close to $300 billion right now. And they are looking for private sector money, foundation money, to really get into the level that we need to be at to address some of the discrepancies. So I think we have a huge opportunity if we're able to be very intentional with it. And for us, we centered on equity, specifically centering on the communities that are the most disproportionately impacted because of many different systemic barriers, but also unfortunately the racist structures that we're currently operating. So we focus a lot on the Black, Latina, indigenous communities, and specifically understanding some of those unique barriers that we continuously see at the micro and macro level.
Would anyone else
I
like
mean,
to
I can
add?
jump in.
Yeah.
These systems by default are very data hungry. Like they are sucking up information from everywhere and anywhere, which effectively means at some point they come after our information. Like they sort of like violate our privacy. And again, in that 3-legged stool metaphor, like they're trying to, like commercial entities, again, I come from a commercial world. I love my commercial partners, but like their incentive model is to try to eke in as much as they can into that private realm. And I think it's our job, again, to tell the reasons and to stand up and portray the world that we want to live in and not sort of just like let these defaults sort of happen. So we can start talking about what does it mean to protect our civil rights, what it means to protect our privacy. And this goes into every single issue area you can think about. Like, I do a podcast on this, but like one of the things we talked about was just like how these technologies are infringing on reproductive freedom and all these different aspects that are important to the communities that we deal with. So we can start saying what's really important to make sure we can push back and get people to support us in making sure these systems are built the way that we really want to. And I think that's really kind of both our opportunity and our responsibility in a lot of ways to go do that.
I'll jump in and just that, if voice at the table in terms of the development of the tools is critical, right? Power when it comes to governance is also critical, right? And so the examples I've seen have been more at the organizational level, but folks need to hear what those examples look like as they're building out their systems. And so Beyond 12 works with college-bound students and trying to support them on their journey. They're thinking through what are the right governance structures that we need in place to protect this very, very sensitive student data, right? And they're happy to share with others how they're building out their governance structure. Other folks here in San Francisco are building out task force of folks throughout the organization, from the frontline staff members all the way to the leadership team and their tech folks, to think through what that governance structure looks like as their machines continue to learn, if it's staying in the bounds and the ethics that they'd like to hold the tools within. And I think these are just good examples to see just at the organizational level what some folks are doing, but I think that we also have to think through how do we do this at the broader, more societal level, or these huger data sets that we're working in with as well.
Yeah, it's such a juicy question. Is anyone excited about the 3-day weekend ahead? Barbecues, plans, it's the 130th Labor Day this weekend, this year. And based on other tech innovations, in this case, STEAM, we had a big revolution and all this economic opportunity, which also led to 12-hour work days, 6 days a week, which then the rest of society, and now as you're on the stool, I think the stool is out of balance, and it took pressure from other parts of the stool to recenter into the kind of society that we want to live in. So I don't know, and sometimes I feel like the AI FOMO that Vanessa mentioned is the best case scenario, and a lot of times we get stuck at the F. It's just the AI fear, and I think some of that's just based on our own history of how destabilizing it is every time there's new technologies in our society. So I don't know, at Fast Forward, I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to support entrepreneurs who are using technology for good, and it's a real pleasure and a gift. And also, there's all these other things happening around us. And now part of our job is also to bring more people along with us on our journey and to provide tools and resources for all kinds of nonprofits and entrepreneurs, but also philanthropists and people who can help support these kind of organizations. And so we do what we can to write articles, provide resources, or create playbooks. We write about questions great makers can ask to support AI nonprofits. But if there's anything, a role for us to play or any way we can help, anyone in this room who's also interested in working in this space that I think is promising and also challenging and full of fear, that's something that's really exciting for us. So I think at the end of the day, it's our story to write. And so I hope we can all come together and not end up in the situation that they were 130 years ago, where it took a lot of protests and riots in order to get some of the luxuries that we take for granted today.
This is such a rich conversation, and I have so many more questions, but we are down to the final few minutes. So I'm going to cheat and kind of wedge two together in a lightning round to see. I feel like we've heard already many of you talking about the important, the lessons learned, lifting up these lessons, sharing out these early learnings. If you have any other thoughts or calls to action about what philanthropy can be doing to make sure, especially communities less resourced than the Bay Area or elsewhere in the country, how do we make sure that we're sharing those lessons as a field and that those early learnings are reaching broad audiences who could benefit from them? And I think then the other one that I would tack on is, if we were going to reconvene in a year, what's the accomplishment you would hope that you were here to report back on, the thing that the field achieved in this year that you would really like to see and hope to, a year from now, have come to fruition? Rafi, we'll start with you again and work our way down.
I feel that's unfair. I mean, I think one of the accomplishments, so I think what the role of philanthropy could really be is to help portray what we feel is the responsible way for these technologies to be deployed into our society and through these organizations that we work with, especially the ones that are working with the most vulnerable people, sort of at the edge. And a lot of what I think about is this age-old debate when it comes to AI of whether it's meant to automate or whether it's meant to augment. And so for us, at least at Emerson, we try to repeatedly nudge of we are we want these tools to be built in such a way that gives every single person superpowers. Like we want to like have the best of every single one of us, the best teachers, the best doctors, the best people working in every single one of our communities. And if these tools can help us get there quickly, I mean, if you remember the report, like it seems to help those who are like on the experience gap might be the people on the lower end of the scale. Like if these tools can help accelerate a bunch of these communities that we work with in this augmented way, I think that could be amazing. So I think the thing that I would love to see in a year is sort of like this trend toward augmentation of people having superpowers, of building tools to empower humans, not to take jobs away, not to take people out of their roles, but to give them the ability to move faster, more efficiently, and be the best of themselves.
Rafi is always hard to follow. I'm really grateful for this event. Like I think like what we need more of is this transparency and sharing. I think that's like important part of how we'll be successful in this endeavor. Vanessa started early on by showing how like actually untransparent most of the work in AI is, and how a lot of the models and are secret and hard to understand. So I think like it's incumbent upon us in order to be successful to share learnings, best practices, the pitfalls, what's working and what's not working, because so many of the resources are limited in this sector. If I think about like a year from now, what I'd like to see, Lily alluded a little earlier to like how there's some money in philanthropy, but there's actually a lot more capital. And I feel like those folks who are the capital allocators, like I view that money as like potential energy, and what it enables is people to work on the things that you're excited about. And so I hope that there are folks who are in those roles who will think about the opportunity to really deploy capital in this way so that people can work on solving these long-standing problems using the latest tools.
I'll start with the last question. I'll work my way. I would love to see three things in 1 year. Time is of urgency. I would like to see at least one policy win, one advocacy win that can really help us have some of those guidelines that are needed to really fuel the innovation from the startups, the CBOs, but everyone. So then that we feel a little bit more comfortable really being able to use some of these tools at scale. The second is that I would love to see is, to your point, the new opportunities for funding, to be able to actually have demonstrable applications of these tools. So like next year, I want to be able to, instead of us here, I want to see the community leaders telling us what they've been building, how it's actually helping close those gaps, what help do they need, how can we really be able to flip the scenario, and us as foundations and funders be able to really see them as investments, to see those areas. And I think that the third part is really looking at, to your point earlier, is looking at what is a moonshot? Because when we think about all these amazing technologies, every single time we're entering some prompt, it's costing us some level of energy consumption. There is an environmental equity issue with all the development of these technologies. Maybe because we're in the Bay Area, we may not be able to see the consequences, but if you go to East Oakland and other areas or other parts of the world, yes, you see those servers and the heat that they're coming off, the water consumption that these technologies are using. So if we're going to really use this responsibly, we better make sure that we're applying for those moonshots of our generation. If we think about, to your point, learning past from history, what's the moonshot that we want to have? So I'm going to actually leave that question for you all here, because if you think about the time, the use of resources, both capital, time, and talent, and the environment, what should we actually be deploying it towards?
You know, I would just call out to the funder community, right? I think that there is a lot of FOMO. I think funders really want to jump into the space, but fear is standing in the way, right? And so I think organizations should name their fears and work through it. And then we really should work together to move with purpose and fix things, right? And I would hope that a year from now, that as the funder community, we could look to get resources in the hands of the folks who understand these communities, who reflect these communities the most, which are the nonprofits that work in these communities every day. And I think that that'll be where we'll really see some advancements, right? But I think it is time to make sure that we work through our fears and get the resources out there.
That is an excellent way to conclude this panel. So everyone, please join me in thanking all of our panelists for participating today.
thank you so much to our panelists for that really rich discussion. I think there was so much there, and wherever you sit on the spectrum of comfortable with technology, new to technology, I hope you saw a role for yourself in this conversation. So as we're shifting to our next panel, we're going to take a very quick 5-minute break. So please return to your seats in 5 minutes, and we will kick off our panel featuring nonprofit leaders and early use cases of GenAI. Thank you.
we could rotate.
Welcome back, everyone. Now we're transitioning to our next panel focused on early learnings from nonprofit organizations. For this conversation, I'm excited to welcome Ilse Lund, Chief of Strategy at Larkin Street Youth Services, a nonprofit located here in San Francisco, empowering young people to move beyond homelessness. Ilse has worked in the nonprofit reaching over 9 million unique individuals. Hee-Jae Lim is founder and CEO of Talking Points, a national education technology nonprofit with a mission to unlock the potential of families to fuel their children's learning, especially in under-resourced communities. Matt Levy is the Vice President of Evaluation and Learning at First Place for Youth, a nationally recognized education and employment program that provides housing and case management for transition-age foster youth aged 18 to 26. This conversation will be moderated by Tracy Choi from the San Francisco Fed. Tracy Choi is a senior outreach manager in community development, and she's responsible for fostering strategic partnerships and engaging with a broad range of stakeholders around critical economic and community development challenges facing low and moderate income communities. Take it away, Tracy.
Thanks, Bina. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be
for careers. We've done it for over 13 years. We've helped millions of people. And traditionally, we've done it with crowdsourcing. We're structured it around young people getting their career questions out there into the world. And then we have over 150,000 volunteers who answer their questions online. And really the spirit there is to make sure that no career question goes unanswered. And for me, that's very personal, because when I was a young person, when I was in my education, I was very focused on making sure that when I finished what I was doing in school, that I was going to have a job that was going to give me financial stability, because we didn't have the stability that we needed when I was a young person. So what was essential for me was to be able to get my very naive, very beginner questions about careers out in front of real mentors who answered my questions. And they were critical for me to be able to start my career and get the financial stability that I sought as a young person. And from there, really inspired by my mentors, I turned back and started mentoring and volunteering with young people. And that's what got me into this work, and that's really the spirit of the origination of Career Village. But over time, where we started as an organization that used technology with crowdsourcing to help people, it was about 2022 when we started using generative AI to a really large extent in order to improve our operations. And when ChatGPT dropped in, what was it, something like October, November of 2022, if I remember correctly, we started exploring the potential there. January 2023, I went to a library in San Jose. We had a program we were running there, help a bunch of young people get their career questions out. And I pulled a couple of high school students aside and I sat them down and I said, hey, this is called AI. We're going to put you in front of it. And what we're going to try to do is I'm going to help you out over your shoulder. I'm going to be the scaffolding. I'm going to be the guardrails. Let's just see if we can have a good career coaching chat here. And it was phenomenal. I was super impressed. Obviously, mistakes were made. It wasn't perfect. The learner didn't always know exactly what to ask. All those things were true. But with somebody who knew how to wield the tool there, we could help a great conversation happen. And that's when we knew that there was real potential worth exploring. So in early 2023, we launched the AI Career Coach Initiative, and we formed a coalition of over 20 nonprofits and educational institutions to be a part of co-designing, field testing, and iterating on Coach, which is our AI career coach that we're now deploying in education and workforce settings.
That's so exciting. Ilsa, I love to hear from at Youth Larkin Street Youth Services. You all are just starting to navigate into GenAI, and would love to hear your thought process and maybe an update on where you all are on the process.
Sure, thanks, Tracy. I have the enviable position of getting to be the person up here who knows almost nothing. When I was invited to sit on this panel, I had to Google GenAI to make sure that I had is working to end youth homelessness in the Bay Area and more broadly. And we, following a theme that came up from panel number one, we came to this decision to embark on an AI journey, not because we wanted to apply a new and sexy technology, but because we had some big problems to solve. Our work is only getting harder. This year's point in time count, which is a count of folks who are experiencing homelessness in San Francisco, the number of youth who are experiencing homelessness actually went up this year for the first time in 10 years, even though Larkin Street and our partner organizations housed more youth than we housed ever before. So as our work is getting harder, we have to think about doing our work differently. As we were developing our strategic plan, two themes that came up over and over again had to do with something we were seeing in the data and through the lived experience of our staff and young people, where that young people are getting stuck in our continuum of services. They aren't moving as quickly as we would like them to see from an engagement program into a housing program, from a housing program into independent an independent life kind of beyond homelessness. And so AI became a strategy that can solve the problem. If we can help move young people more quickly through our continuum, we could serve 15, 20% more young people without adding a single bed of housing to our continuum. So AI as a case management tool, as a tool to really help guide our case managers to connect young people as quickly as possible with the services that they need when they need them. The hope is that we'll see them move more quickly through our continuum. The other big problem we're facing as an organization, as a sector, which Nick alluded to, is our workforce. Recruiting, retaining, and training folks to work in this field is hard. And we see the tools that we can use to augment their jobs, make them feel more effective more quickly, will hopefully lead to retention and, of course, ultimately better outcomes for our young people. So in closing, where are we? We had our launch meeting 10 days ago with our consulting partners to get this off the ground. So we're very early in the journey. We're at a very exciting state. There's a little bit of the fear that we're kind of working through, but now is really the visioning exercise, which is an exciting place to be.
And Matt, you are also from a very similar type of service organization, maybe a little further along, not as fresh as 10 days ago. So we'd love to hear how First Place for Youth is really adopting AI, and what are some of the impacts it's having on your organization, your staff, and even for your client outcomes.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Ilsa, also for introducing some of these key things. So I work at First Place for Youth. We serve young people aging out of foster care, right at the age of 18 until their 25th birthday in California and other states. And similarly, right, the issues have kind of grown over time as we think about kind of youth mental health challenges and crisis kind of during COVID. We actually launched our AI tool about 2 months before COVID. So with this grand idea that we can help the young people in our programs achieve a higher paying job, right? Like, we've been doing this work for 25 years. That means we've served over 10,000 young people in our programs. We've got a lot of data. So how can we leverage that data to work smarter and not harder, to increase our impact, maybe to increase the time or decrease the time it takes to get to that impact, to provide staff with more knowledge and insights and tools, right? Sometimes it's not even the insight, it's literally access to the data that they've input into some clunky system that they forgot where it is or how to access it. We can visualize it and create that one-stop shop for them to become smarter and better serve the young person. So when we talk about impacts, one of the challenges, well, we launched right before COVID, and that changed the world, right, in terms of how we do things, in terms of school and work. You think about foster youth typically coming, 100% of them are low income. You think about access to digital technology, phones and other things is heightened. But I will say those 2 years of kind of lockdowns and other things gave us such a chance to figure out what data matters. So a lot of nonprofits face this challenge of we track too much data, right? Let's ask this question. Oh, let's ask this question. Oh, let's ask this question. Over time, you're asking 500 questions to young people every 6 months. And you have to ask the question, do we need to ask 500 questions or can we ask 50? So one of the great benefits of adopting AI is to streamline what you're collecting to collect what matters. How do you know what matters? Well, you're looking at the outcomes. You're looking at the subgroups and the populations for what they're achieving, how far they're getting along, what are those milestones they achieve. So data quality and infrastructure improved tenfold. That's kind of a very exciting thing you'll see early on. I think another thing is efficiency, right? By getting to remove so much of that data, social workers do not want to spend a lot of time inputting data, nor do they want to spend a lot of time looking at a chart, trying to make sense of it, and then translate to a face-to-face practice, right, with their clients. So if we can have them spend less time entering the data, more time getting the value back from that data, right, the hope, right, I think we've seen that with some of our staff. They're starting to leverage that to think differently and more creatively about how they interact with our staff. I don't know, I'm trying to think, the outcomes piece, I think we're not seeing the, we're not doing an RCT and saying, oh, outcomes are 10% better. But I think we're so much more sophisticated in terms of what we're asking, what we're tracking, how we're thinking about equity in terms of who's getting where and how we can serve the populations and subgroups that aren't getting as far. Because that's a historical thing, much bigger than any one organization. But we have a role to play in trying to re-engage and decrease inequity.
Thank you, Matt. And Hijay, your story really spoke to my 5th grade Tracy, who grew up in an immigrant household where English was not the primary language spoken. And so can you tell us about Talking Points and how is it improving outcomes for students and even for some of your teachers?
Sure. So as Bina mentioned, Talking Points, our mission is to unlock the superpower of families to be more involved in their children's education, especially in under-resourced, diverse communities. We've been doing this work since 2015. And back then, when we started, it was really kind of driven by my personal story and experience similar to you, Tracy, where I was 8 and we moved to sorry, I'm getting emotional. We moved to a public elementary school, a very Korean immigrant community near London, and I didn't really speak English. I was an English language learner student, and my mom really became this kind of community helper, translator, coach for all the other Korean families who were like living in the kind of the neighborhood. And it got to the extent where she's not a natural born leader, but all these parents would actually stop our car when she came to pick us up, asking my mom all the questions like, when is homework due? I don't understand this form. Am I supposed to fill it out? Like, what are they learning? How's my kid doing? And I think that memory, like visual memory of literally a traffic jam in the school driveway stuck with me. And then decades later, I realized actually research shows that family engagement, this is a crazy statistic, so I'm gonna say it really slowly. Family engagement and the level of family engagement is actually twice as effective at predicting a student's success than that family's socioeconomic status. Absolutely crazy, right? So if we can unlock that lever of family engagement as a strategy to drive outcomes, in this era of decades of education learning gains being wiped through the pandemic, I think it's a crazy powerful strategy that we can drive And that became the foundation of Talking Points. And Talking Points 10 years ago actually started as a two-way translated communication platform. That was back in the day when Google Translate was very nascent, translation technology was not as developed, and about 5 years ago, we started using more education, context-specific translation technology to make the translation quality better. Around the same time, though, we realized actually these are not the only barriers that families and schools face in creating those meaningful family-school partnerships. It's actually limited time, capacity, understanding of the school system. There's a lot more than language and communication barriers. And I think this is where, for us, GenAI gets really exciting, because back in 2018, this is way before COVID, way before ChatGPT became so public, where we said, hey, to be able to remove these barriers, the best practice here is to make it more personalized, make it more culturally relevant, and make it just-in-time training for both families and educators and schools to be able to develop a really meaningful relationships through data, through research. The problem was, it took us, and we actually prototyped this, it took us so long to make it personalized, make it research-driven, make it culturally relevant, because we had to, literally, there was a whole team sitting at the back of the computer making it so. But now I feel like in 2024, we're actually leveraging the latest technology to enable the vision of making it best practice, personalized, and culturally relevant. And I think that's where kind of the really exciting parts of GenAI comes in for us at Talking Points.
I'm already so inspired by all of your stories that are really feeding into your work. But let's get into some nitty-gritty, because I think a lot of folks are really interested to hear how this really plays out. And so we've already kind of talked about questions and the discomfort and some of the FOMO. And given that a lot of the populations that you all serve are some of the most underserved, they're low income, don't have access or resources. And so how can this tool really benefit these types of populations? And so how would you all describe how you're trying to approach really addressing the needs of some of these communities, some of these households who have often been left out of or behind these technological advancements? Hijay, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I can start there. So I think this is a really important question, and one thing that I'm proud of Talking Points having done from the very beginning is what we call human-centered universal design. So as we design a product and platform, we think about who is the most marginalized, hardest to reach family member, and if we can design Talking Points to benefit that person that we think about, then it could be beneficial to everyone and be accessible. So I'm not talking about accessible in the ADA sense, but how do we really center our stakeholders, really in this case our educators, schools, districts, and families in the design process to be able to really reach the most marginalized. So an example of that, Tracy, was when we did a school visit, we actually realized a lot of the family members that we serve are not literate. They cannot read, and they cannot read in English. They also cannot read in their native language, right? But they are too afraid to tell the schools. There's a sense of shame, there's a sense of responsibility. So the schools didn't know, but we realized actually what they needed, these families needed, was a text-to-speech feature and speech-to-text. It actually bypasses being able to read. So that was something that we incorporated into the design of the platform. Another thing we realized during kind of our research process was that a lot of the families were really, really eager to understand how their students were doing at school, but they were actually afraid of saying the wrong thing, right? Asking the question in the wrong way, right? Imagine if you're a Mexican parent who didn't graduate elementary school, you're working 3 jobs here, you don't understand the school system, you're just trying hard to put food on the table. So kind of a design process we went to is we actually made templates. Now they are a lot of GenAI kind of enabled, templates for questions for families to ask their teachers, right? In a way that this is okay. It builds confidence, it builds the capacity. And those are some of the examples how we really kind of incorporate our stakeholders into the design process and making it universally accessible.
Yeah, go Jared.
Yeah, I think I'd add on that. I think in our case, when we started doing testing, we were doing testing back in the first MVP version of our AI career coach. We built in 10 weeks. I think we had it in front of people in July 2023. So it was very early. And essentially what we did is we respected the beneficiary. We communicated with them about what this was. We were transparent that this is emerging technology that has all kinds of issues with it, and we need to learn. And then we included them, and they tried it out. And we didn't do that on our own. That's why we formed a coalition of over 20 organizations, because as much as we're subject matter experts in our particular vertical, we also had to work with institutions that were deeply embedded within communities that we didn't know as well, and were able to do real testing with real people. And I think only if you get your beneficiaries into the feedback loop can we hope for the technology to actually represent their interests. So it's really essential that we really include and engage people in it. And there's fears, there's reasonable concerns. What if it says something I don't want it to say? I don't control this thing, I don't write every rule. The whole point of it all is that we don't write all the rules for everything that happens in every moment. That's the power, and that's also the other edge of the sword. But I think the key there is to respect the beneficiary and communicate with them about it and engage them in it and give them the ability to say, hey, that was not good. That was of poor quality. I suspect that was biased, whatever it may be, so that you can actually identify. And the good news is that when it comes to bias, these models are very malleable. In fact, they're more malleable in many ways than we are as people. It's easier when you can identify bias to be able to actually work on that and make sure it doesn't come back in an AI system than it is for me to train it out of myself or any of us in this room to be able to train it out of it. It's very hard. We work very hard as people to work on bias, explicit and implicit. With these models, we have a shot at actually pointing, but you got to be able to point it out. You have to monitor for it. You have to be able to detect it and say, that right there, that's not a good example of quality. We need to take that away, and we need to support the beneficiary better. So that's what makes me hopeful for it, but I think the key is really got to have it in front of people.
Matt?
Yeah, happy to add. I think the design principles are so critical, right? So I know for us at First Place, we wanted to start even before we were thinking about what problem we're solving. Well, what problem do young people want us to solve for them, right? Because we are serving them. They kept talking to, they're not earning enough money, they're not getting to that living wage to survive in the Bay Area. It's $30 an hour, right? In San Francisco, 40 hours a week without kids. 10 to 20% of our young people, depending on what age they come to us, right, already have a kid, right, at 18, 19, 20, 21. So they're already far behind. How do we help them catch up? They know money matters. And so we said, okay, well, let's build a tool that helps, not for you all. There's a lot of pressure on you all as young people already, but let's build a tool for our staff so that our staff understand what can help you or young people that have similar experiences to you in the past to get to that level, right? What's been successful, what hasn't. And so again, design, right? So we're thinking about youth feedback at the start, and then we're bringing in, we had staff with lived experience throughout the design process, the implementation process. We're putting the tool, the early prototypes in front of our young people to say, anything seem weird, jarring? Is there things here you don't want your staff to know? Are there things you do want your staff to know differently that kind of, again, can kind of build up, not just, I've told my staff this 3 times, and they're sick of telling their staff that. Let's have the tool tell their staff that. Oh, you're sick of telling the staff how old you are because that matters for every financial benefit you apply for. You need to know date of birth and all these other things. Let's provide that in a secure way to our staff so they can stop asking that. Oh, you want to know what you had 3 different staff in the last year because turnover in the social sector is crazy, right, over the last few years since COVID. It's a real challenge facing nonprofits and government sector. Well, let's make sure that the action plans or goals of our young people are very clearly stated in the young person's words in our tool. And then just the third thing is we have to analyze the results for equity. So as we're looking at outcomes, and it's not just outcomes, it's engagement in services. How many services are young people getting? How does that break down based on various social identity characteristics, kind of alone as well as intersected? That way we can improve and understand our blind spots and try to correct.
Yeah, so Larkin Street, again, working to end youth homelessness for young people through about the age of 24. It's been kind of within the DNA of our organization to really center youth voice. And so we already have lots of systems in place where we are engaging young people in the processes of how we're designing systems, how the system is working for them, what we need to change, think about. And so in introducing a new AI tool, we are, of course, going to use the same strategies that we've always used to engage young people in, is this working? They are the beneficiaries of this tool, but they're not the users of this tool. The users of this tool are our case managers. We know that hiring case managers and staff with lived experience is an exceedingly important way to produce outcomes, because young people relate to staff members who share their experiences. And so, of course, our case managers are deeply involved in the design team. We've started formulating the design team, and our first impulse was, let's get the folks on board who are the most excited about AI, because they need to be the ambassadors of this tool, and then they go back to the teams and they'll give us all this good information. We also need to include those folks who are very resistant to this technology and are not the most enthusiastic, because we're going to be asking all of our case managers to buy into this. So involving all those voices from the outset, I think, is really important, and then folding it into the systems that we already have of data review, data analysis, testing what we see. We've got a quarterly learning agenda where we take the data back to the staff and say, does this feel right? Is this keeping the human in the loop? We're not doing that because we're testing a new AI team. We've been doing that for many years, because you have to be able to trust the data and show the folks who are inputting the data that it's being utilized, that it's that there's real value in the work. Like Matt said, very few frontline workers get into the field because they want to sit in front of a computer. So really, showing the value to them from in a lot of different ways is critical. So again, we're at the very start of this. We feel like we have a foundation as an organization because we've thought through some of these problems in different ways for many years. This is just a new a new tool that we want to put through tried and true processes within the organization.
I feel like what you just said about building that trust within your own staff, but also with the external stakeholders, and I think that was a common theme among all of you, is building that trust, bringing folks along with either using or building this technology is a very important component. And also that there is still a very important role for human interaction, human thought, human element to all of this technology. Let's turn to maybe yourselves as organizations, and I think we've heard that this technology, to develop it, to deploy it, can be very costly, and especially for small to maybe even mid-sized nonprofits, funding can really be a major pain point. And so from your experiences, what does it take in terms of resources, funds, partnerships to really help build that capacity to really kind of incorporate this infrastructure into your nonprofits? Jared, how about we start with you?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to. I just want to voice that it can be a little scary sometimes to talk openly about budgets when we are in a public setting like this one. But I think it's important to do because in this moment where AI transparency is so essential, especially as we heard earlier, we got to be able to talk openly about this as well. I just want to acknowledge that at least on this panel, I think we are an institution that went very hard into it. We went in very early when costs were higher because there was less tooling available, so your mileage may vary. And I also want to acknowledge that we're not just building a tool for our beneficiaries, but we also went the extra step to build a platform for other institutions to build on top of. So we're going to have additional costs that relate to the platform level of things. But to give you a little bit of a sense, the very first version of Coach was built in 10 weeks with roughly 5 people from our staff. So it was 3 engineers, a product manager, a data person. That was a sort of minimally viable team to get that up and running. That's actually not a terribly large expense. It's relatively managed, but then you need like the next 6 to 9 months of a lot of energy spent on iterating, gathering feedback. That generates a big cost. And then when we did decide with the coalition that we were going to advance to a V1, that we were going to come out of beta and we were going to make a real version, then we actually increased the team quite a lot. I think at this point, we're in the 7 to 8 dedicated engineers kind of realm for Coach, plus 2 product managers. There's a data team of 4 now. So the technical team has expanded. Add on top another little bit more than a dozen for partnership management and community management and other essential functions. So all in, we ended up having to spend a single-digit number of millions of dollars to really build the multi-year kind of platform. The good news is that if you were to start this right now, it would be significantly cheaper. We knew we were going to pay a sort of tax, if you will, to build everything right at the tip of the spear, right? Because nothing existed. A good example of that is the monitoring and safety systems that we built. Nothing existed on the market for monitoring and safety in production when we started building it. So we built a completely brand new system because we knew that we, as a nonprofit, were extremely invested in safety and quality monitoring. So we did all that from scratch and did it in production. Now systems have started to crop up and the industry is maturing. And there are some really great sort of utilities out there that can reduce the development of MVP from 5 people working for 10 weeks to a very small number of people working for an afternoon or just a couple of days to get something up and running. So I think that the costs are reducing, but if you're gonna continue to monitor and you're gonna continue to run in perpetuity with safety, really the expenses end up not being as much on the technology side. They actually end up being more on the other operational requirements to keep an eye on that. If you're reading chat transcripts, if you are responding, we're very proactive. So if something goes wrong in a chat, we reach out to the institution or to the learner and say, oh, hey, turns out that chat yesterday, yeah, actually that fact was wrong. There aren't that many nurses in San Francisco. This is the correct information. That's where we're heading towards. So that's operationally more intense. That's what it's like in our experience.
So, Larkin Street's case is very different. We are not creating a new tool. We are engaging with partners at BCT Partners and Project Evident. We were the grateful recipients of an investment from Tipping Point, the capacity building project that Nick talked about earlier to get this off the ground. Tipping Point also put us together with these partners who are already engaged in this work. A fairly remarkable, I understand and am now feeling thing is that the partners at Project Evident and BCT Partners are social workers. They're social workers who have developed AI tools, and so they already speak our language and understand some of the equity concerns and the change management issues that are unique to nonprofits. So we are getting a real deal, right? Because I think that those are, kind of hard to quantify costs that we're getting as part of this partnership. So for, low six figures, we are able to launch a tool that already exists, customize it significantly for our population. It sits on top of our existing client management system. It's not that we are completely changing the client management system that it already uses. It takes all of the data, the many decades of data that we've been collecting. So it's a much lower upfront cost because again, it's an existing tool, and it's with partners who have already engaged in this work with other nonprofits who have done a lot of the learning that we get to benefit from already. So we're very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, I think there's even some, unfortunately, some prerequisites in the nonprofit sector, especially working in child welfare, juvenile justice, homelessness, that may make it impossible or very difficult to even adopt tools like these. And that's because many funders actually require entry of data into their own system, and you don't have access or a copy of your own data, right? There's no way to import and export. So you have kind of a huge issue of just data access and kind of the ability to interrogate your own data. Many small nonprofits don't have that today. So that's kind of a prerequisite. We never faced that problem. We faced the other problem, I think, like Larkin Street, we have to enter data in multiple systems, right? Again, because of that challenge. The other prerequisite is time. I think the biggest cost is time. And so one way we early on were like, how do we build the time for staff to spend the time developing this tool, thinking about the questions we're asking, the things we want to visualize and give feedback? Well, let's make time, right? Let's use AI's ability to automate repetitive tasks and make things simpler to make time so that we can invest it in higher utility tasks, like thinking about how do we better serve our young people? What do we think is going to best serve them? How do you leverage data to inform your next meeting with your young person? What kinds of data do you want? Is there a visual you want to bring to the meeting? So I think the biggest cost is time. To Ilsa's point, there's so much about nonprofits really renting these tools, right? Paying these expert AI, former social worker experts to provide the resources and tools that can make it a lot easier, kind of a lot more entry level than hiring the engineers and the others and gathering the data, storing that data, manipulating that data. I mean, there's so many steps and costs associated with that, whereas renting, it's gonna be a lot cheaper.
I mean, I think the cost of development for us is mostly in R&D, so our operating costs and kind of the cost of providing the program and platform is actually covered through our earned revenue, which are licensing fees to school districts. But the R&D that's the risky capital that philanthropy needs to give us. And I think the question is, it's not necessarily the amount and the level of capital that comes from philanthropy, but it's how you give it. I think in this kind of, in Silicon Valley, everyone talks about agile product development, right? You kind of do a lot of pilots. That's what we do. We do rapid experimentation with a lot of AI-driven features. We pilot it with schools and districts. We get feedback from families and educators. We link it to student outcomes data or any other school-based data to see, hey, does this actually drive outcomes? And if it does, then choose to embed it into the whole platform. If you are a funder, though, if you're a funder who doesn't really fully understand that kind of product development and how to use GenAI, you'd be thinking, okay, so what are the features that you will have in a year's time? And my answer to you is, I don't actually know. Like, to tell you that list of features that we will use would be frankly a lie, and it would be a bad way for us to use our resources to get to the outcomes we want. So I think it's not so much of the level of funding. I mean, that too, that goes into R&D, but how much risk are philanthropists willing to take and just, trust the nonprofits to say, we run this process and whatever comes out of it, I can't guarantee it. So I think that's kind of my call to action to the funders in the room. I think the other side of GenAI and kind of, the power of AI that I think as a group we haven't highlighted, but at least at Talking Points we've really leveraged is the power of AI in research. So we have an in-house research team And a couple of years ago, we really wanted to analyze what are the key topics of conversation between parents and communities and school districts. And by the way, we're really biased towards working with a marginalized community, so it's a very unique data set. And we would have had to shift through using humans, sounds very clinical, but really humans, to be able to analyze hundreds of millions of conversations without a topic model that we leveraged. So we were able to actually analyze millions of conversations and do the research on our data set using very little resources compared to hundreds of humans that would have had to go and label the topics. And we're really excited to be able to share that with the field. So I think for the funders in the room, I think that's a real kind of leverage and a unique vantage point that nonprofits can have. They are sitting on very unique, valuable data. So how do we use that and leverage it for the broader field, I think is an important question for us to solve together.
Like Jared, you had said, I really appreciate the transparency about this particular topic, because I know it could be a little touchy, but I would love to kind of wrap us up on a more hopeful and high note. And especially for our audience of folks who may be tuning in, they really are just curious and they haven't maybe fully bought into GenAI. They might think that it's overhyped. And then you do have some folks who are really trying to understand what this is all about. And so for maybe the skeptics in the world, for those who are having that severe FOMO, what are some insights, some advice, some words of comfort that you could offer as users and nonprofits who are really embracing this technology? Jared, let's start with you.
Sure. So I think I would just, for the funders, I would just plus one, Hije, what you said. I think if you're ever going to fund innovation, now is the time. And if you're ever going to do it with bravery, now is the moment where you have to. But for the nonprofits, I say first, let your beneficiaries guide you, whether they are your end beneficiaries or they are your staff members, whoever your stakeholders are. Sit down with them. Do what I did in San Jose at the library and sit down with somebody and say, hey, let's just try out some stuff and let's see what the possibilities are. And if they say, hey, this is really not going to help me out very much, then do not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on developing large tools, right, for it. But if they say, yeah, this actually improves this, trust your beneficiaries to tell you if there's any there. And in our experience, this is an incredibly powerful tool. And I think we have, in a moment where there's so much change happening, and Kevin Berenblatt in the previous panel alluded to the Industrial Revolution, where there's tremendous labor market change happening. We need to help, at least for our institution, we need to help people navigate that labor market change using whatever tools we can that are as effective as possible. And if the irony comes out that using AI as part of that answer to help people navigate an AI labor market if that's the case, so be it, then that's what we're going to use. So I'd say let the beneficiaries guide you.
Great. Elsa?
I want to plus one what you just said around, Larkin Street is at this visionary stage of the game, right? Because we're just getting started, and the workforce issue is a primary driver of why we are implementing this tool, as well as what we think will result in speedier outcomes. So, I just want to sort of, I guess, leave with that vision, which is what's inspiring us. We know that about 50% of folks who are experiencing adult homelessness experience their first bout of homelessness before they're 25. So if we can do more with youth to end their homelessness more quickly, it's a huge prevention strategy. It's what could conceivably reduce adult homelessness by 50%. And so we are going to throw the tools that we think will work at this problem. So I guess that's where I leave you. Think of the vision, think of the big problem, and don't be shy about trying new ways to solve them.
Love that. Totally echo everything that's been said. I think Thinking about the dream big, like we are facing such big issues in our cities and in our societies and in our communities, and technology is a piece of that, right? So don't shy away, right? It's never too late to engage these technologies because we can learn from them, right? In the data we gather, or we're answering the wrong questions, or oh, we're doing something wrong with how we deliver services. Well, the data is going to help, whether that's data from your beneficiaries and direct conversations, or that's the data itself that can help you understand. So dream big, but also start small, right? What's that simple problem you can solve in the next month? Because you can build up the appetite for culture change. I think a lot of nonprofits, we were very much like that, even though we love data and use a lot of data. If we started too big and it took too long, it would have failed, right? So what were those early wins we could point to kind of generate buy-in and a culture and shift that culture?
I'm going to add to your phrase, dream big, start small, and start experimenting. So that's kind of like the third. Because whatever experiments you're running, you don't actually know the outcome, but at least you'll learn something from it. And I think about, in the position of running a nonprofit in this world where computing power doubles every 2 years or something like that, right? Someone mentioned foundations giving out 5% of their endowment. I think there's a mismatch there. But if we do not do the work as nonprofits of embracing the technology, the train has left the station in GenAI and AI, right? The train has left the station, and it's our jobs collectively to be able to say, hey, what would not make all the marginalized populations and the underserved leave behind even more? And I think that that's the job us together, the nonprofits can do. And I think there's an incredible sense of urgency in this fast-changing world. So that's my call to action to you.
I love that end note. Thank you all so much. Would you all please join me in thanking our panelists? And I'll hand it back to Bina to wrap us up.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to all this panel. This was so great to be able to drill down, get the real lessons learned, and just in general to break down this sort of big topic that can be hard to get your head around if you're not in this space. These are really tangible and helpful examples, so thank you so much. With that, that's a wrap for today's event. These panelists across this panel, the previous panel, and Vanessa have given us so much to think about. We hope that the conversation today has sparked some ideas for you and your organizations, and as you think about GenAI in your own work, or as you think about being a part of the conversation, even if you're not going to be employing or deploying these technologies. So I encourage you to visit our website to view previous EERN events and sign up to receive updates there. In December, we'll be hosting a session featuring MIT economist David Otter. So with that, I'll just say thank you to all of our panelists and all that joined today in person and on the live stream. Thank you so much.
A nuestra reina de la salsa del mundo.